Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We're the editors of Manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News, and we each have more than 20 years of experience covering the industry. Every week, we cover the 5 biggest stories in manufacturing and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. So, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also give the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email us, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday at 2 p.m., so subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification when we go live every Thursday. Jeff, how you doing this week?
I'm great, man. Good to be back. Appreciate Andy filling in for me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Good to have you back. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing great. It's nice to have the trio back in action this week.
All right. Well, before we jump into our first story this week, we have a word from our sponsor, Clio Communications. This episode is brought to you by Clio Communications. Increasing efforts in digitalization, automation, and analytics is a priority for 30% of operation and supply chain officers heading into 2025. However, the majority of the supply chain workforce still lacks the digital expertise needed to operate promising new tools. The 2024 Supply Chains Jobs Report from Clio Communications gives you a detailed look into what supply chain organizations are doing or not doing to prepare their workforce for emerging tech. So, download it now. There's a link in the body copy or in the live chat. All right, our first story this week. Boeing expects to lay off 400 workers from Moon Project. During Donald Trump's first administration, the president wanted to colonize the moon. Specifically, he wanted a permanent lunar base that could be used in a future mission to Mars. In 2019, NASA said Project Artemis would cost between $20 billion and $30 billion. 2 years later, the cost is ballooned to $93 billion, and that is just through 2025. Now, Bloomberg says the program may be, quote, poised for a shakeup, and the rumblings have begun. Boeing recently revealed plans to reduce staffing on its Space Launch System team by 400, and they're going to do it soon. That is more than a third of the staff gone to, quote, align with revisions to the Artemis program and cost expectations. From a cost perspective, the SLS rocket alone will cost $24 billion through year-end, and test and development delays mean the original timeline has been blown. In 2022, the SLS Artemis sent an uncrewed flight around the moon, and a crewed launch of Artemis II is expected for April 2026, a lunar landing in 2027. And there's a new competitor in town. You might have heard of him. Elon Musk, founder of Boeing competitor SpaceX and President Trump's new wingman, has called the Artemis architecture, quote, extremely inefficient, saying something entirely new is needed. And it looks like Trump has reset his sights on Mars. So, Anna, will President Trump stick with the company, or is Boeing off the tether?
I don't know. It's a strange situation right now for sure. And I can't decide whether the plan here is to casually let Elon Musk and Boeing rival SpaceX just direct how this program progresses, or if it's too expensive with their cost cutting, or a third possibility, Trump is just bored with it because it's taking too long. I feel like that's also reasonable to think. No matter, none of these scenarios are good for Boeing. I think it's tough for that company to defend itself right now when you look at recent events, including quality problems, groundings, investigations. We have the fact that their first space capsule launch was a complete disaster, and they basically stranded some astronauts in space. Not a good look.
No.
So whether you agree with Trump and Musk on the whole like slash and burn, start over strategy, it could be difficult, I think, at this time to reasonably defend Boeing's role on the surface. When you also add to that the cost overruns and the timeline overruns, which are kind of par for the course in space and military for that, but it's not exactly a vote of confidence. So one of our commenters on the story highlighted my wording, Elon Musk and his influence on the Trump administration. I just want to say, I felt like that was suggesting there was some subtext there. I don't think that there is. I think that, I don't know how you can view it any other way. I think
he's suggesting that he doesn't have influence on it?
I don't know.
Oh,
I just,
all right.
I think it's pretty unbiased.
It's a shocking take.
honestly. But to look at this through the lens of Elon's interests, then I think this very likely could be a disaster for Boeing, and also maybe the death knell for the Artemis program. And said another way by Science Magazine, quote, as Elon Musk takes a more significant role in shaping government spending, he has been vocal about redirecting focus from the moon to Mars, labeling the Artemis program as inefficient and a distraction. So if Elon thinks it's inefficient, I don't know if it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, and Jeff, in every race, there's a winner and a loser. And I feel like it's pretty clear who the loser was in this one, even before the hand went on the scale.
Well, you can talk about the hand being on the scale or Musk's influence, but like it or not, like he's got some authority here. He has successfully done some of these things. Mm-hmm. He's shown more wins lately than Boeing has when it comes to space launch. So he's got some hubris here. I mean, he's earned it. Aside from all that, I do think Boeing's got a lot of problems. We've talked about them. I don't think we need to pile on any more here. So if they need to, it might almost be in their best interest to cut their losses here and try to get the rest of their house figured out and straightened up before they continue to put more money and more effort and more resources into something where they're clearly struggling. Mm-hmm. I still think that we're going to the moon. I think we have to. Yeah. It's the next step. I know everybody's talking about Mars, and that's what Musk, all he wants to talk to. We need to figure out how to do the easier part well first, okay? Long term, Mars probably is where we're going to end up or want to go, but we need these moon missions first. So it may not be Boeing. Probably won't be Boeing. Yeah. May not be named Artemis, but this type of mission is going to happen. This will take place, whether it's with SpaceX or somebody else. Remains to be seen. But right now, like it or not, Musk is in a position of authority, and he kind of deserves to be. I think he's earned it.
In this specific instance.
Yeah.
I don't think we're piling on anymore. I feel like we're closer to eulogizing.
Yeah, it's what it is. I mean, it's tough.
No, Boeing has employees working on this program both in Alabama and Florida. Each employee is going to receive a 60-day notice of the involuntary layoff. I was also surprised, I guess, like when you're on this specific of a project in a Boeing, maybe you can't be reshuffled inside, but I mean, hey, maybe a new opportunity for you at SpaceX.
Maybe, what's kind of interesting too, and they talk about the cost overruns here for Artemis, $93 billion. That's actually, if you were to put the initial moon launch mission into today's dollars, that's about a third of what it cost.
Yeah.
So just to kind of offer some perspective there, yeah, it's over budget. Yeah, it's a ton of money. But I guess in some ways we have gotten a little better. It's not costing $300 billion like the first one did.
There we go. And we will be mining on the moon at some point. I just don't know when. Sometime.
Mining or manufacturing or both?
Both. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, no. According to mine, in case you missed it, they're going to manufacture somewhere in between. Teaser.
Ooh.
All right, our next most popular story. Air Force Frankensteins 2 wrecked aircraft into working F-35s. In late 2023, the U.S. Air Force took a pair of wrecks and tried to combine them into a single F-35A Lightning II. And you know what? It worked. 2 years ago, the F-35 Joint Program Office assembled a, quote, dream team to rebuild an AF-211 that lost its nose cone in 2021 using the front end of an F-35 that suffered a severe engine fire in 2014. They called the project the Frankenbird Project. Lockheed Martin engineer Scott Taylor said his team was in, since they've already restored a beat-up F-22. But this was the first time trying something like this with an F-35. Taylor said, quote, all of the aircraft sections can be demated and remated, theoretically, but it just never has been done before. This is history. The team has had to reinstall landing gear, rewire the aircraft, rebuild the cockpit, and install several components. The project is estimated to have cost under $6 million, which is way less than the $80 million it cost for a new F-35A. After completing a successful functional flight, the Frankenbird is now off to Texas for final certifications before returning to service. Anna, would you have any apprehensions toward flying on something that was referred to at any point as the Frankenbird?
I actually thought this was a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
I personally, am I getting on the Frankenbird? I don't know. But I do think that, like, when you look at why they're doing this, it kind of makes sense. So the F-35 program, as you mentioned, it's an $80 million plane. The program itself is supposed to cost U.S. taxpayers $2 trillion over its lifetime. That's an eye-popping number, obviously, but the consideration there is it's supposed to run until 2088. So with that timeline, very long timeline, also comes, I think, the thought that maybe it does warrant looking at some ways that you can look at these components, see if they can be repurposed in some kind of way to get a more useful life out of each and every one of these, because they are very expensive. So I don't know. I think aerospace, specifically companies like SpaceX, we're talking about SpaceX again, but it wasn't that long ago that missions to outer space, you never reused anything, right? And just in the last handful of years, we've seen that take shape with some of these private sector companies that are saying, look, actually, we found ways that to leverage technology and to repurpose some of these boosters and things like that.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if maybe that's giving the military a little bit of courage or emboldening them a little bit to look at ways that they can try to patchwork together some solutions with components that are maybe not useless at this point. That especially when you look at that insane price tag for the F-35 program, and it's not just the fact that that program's going till 2088, but it's also inflation is a huge factor in why that number is so high. So that's tough to swallow when you consider that inflation adds nothing to your gain. You're just paying more for the same thing, right? So looking at unique ways of making things work with tech and tools that we have available, I think is a good idea. Let's just hope it remains a concept of, if it works, let's try it, not we have to cut costs, let's figure out a way to cut costs. Like that would be a concern for me. But if it's like the trial is first because, like, hey, maybe we can, maybe this works, then that's where I think the focus should be.
I think there's a lot of opportunities to sort of refocus and kind of cut some waste streams in a lot of places without going too far. I mean, just because we become like I don't want to say overly careful with a lot of these things, but Jeff, this also made me really think about like how, we don't reuse any surgical tools. I mean, you use a scalpel, a forceps, and a scissors once, and then it gets thrown away. And do you think that, there's a little bit more to learn there with this project in terms of reusability rather than like, it's been an accident, scrap it all?
100%. Absolutely. And I think echoing what Anna was kind of going with there, it was done in a proactive fashion. It wasn't like waiting until we had to. Yeah. Because that was one of the first flashbacks I had here. There's a lot of times, and I know this was 20 years ago when I was in the Army and stuff, but it was, hey, in a pinch, you can use this in this setting as well. Whether it was a small arms weapons system, whether it was medical stuff, whether it was even the protective mask, there was ways that you could sort of jimmy rig things to make it work. So that's what made me nervous at first when you're looking at this. Yeah. But due to the fact that they had some highly qualified engineers, they were taking almost 2 years, a year and a half, to really make sure it worked, and they're still testing and validating it. Again, I think is a real positive indicator of trying to make more common sense and integrate more resourcefulness into our craft of air fleet or jets. So it's very positive there. Again, proactive approach is what I like the most, not waiting until we had to. The other thing I think is actually pretty impressive here, when you talk about a $6 million project versus an $80 million jet, Lockheed didn't have to do that. Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at it from their perspective, it's like, this isn't helping me.
Yeah, why would I fix this?
Why would I want to do that? Yeah, so I think that was also very impressive on their part that they dedicated some of their engineering expertise to do that. Going back to your point, just not trying to sharpshoot or anything, but you can wash some surgical instruments.
No, I understand that. No, those were specific ones that were labeled as being thrown out. But like,
I know there's somebody out there who's going to go, yeah, but David.
Oh yeah.
So we know you can clean some of you got to throw away.
True. No, I specified those specifically, because I could see, hey, scalpel being maybe not used for more in-body procedures, but maybe go to an artist. Forceps really handy in fishing. Just be like, hey, this forceps was also inside this person. Anna, I found a very unscientific list on the internet, so it's got to be absolutely true, of the most popular things that are thrown away once they break, even though they're actually easy to fix.
Okay.
What do you think is in the top 3?
Oh.
So it's easy to fix?
Yeah. They're typically thrown away once they break, but they're actually easy to fix.
Ink pen.
Oh, well.
Ink pad. Is that what you
Pen. A pen. Ink pen.
Wow.
Typically, it doesn't work. I just throw it
higher
away.
ticket item.
Yeah. Computer?
Okay. I mean, number one was appliances.
Okay.
Because that does, and I've lived that, dryer died, and then I replaced a heating element. I'm like, whoa. All right, that was easy.
It's alive.
Number two, cars. But I think I think there's a differentiation there between and number three, it kind of hurts a little bit. Most people said relationships. It's like, didn't see that right in answer coming.
Was this like on Family Feud that you got this list?
Survey says. No, it was a very scientific poll. I believe taken on Reddit, but still, I mean, you just got to trust the numbers sometimes.
Relationships.
All right. That's where it had me. I was just like, all right. Our next most popular story, adhesives manufacturer to axe 72 facilities in cost-cutting Blitz. H.B. Fuller manufactures adhesives, sealants, and specialty chemicals. Following a tough Q4 due to pricing volatility, high material costs, and tight margins, the Minnesota-based company has to make some tough decisions. CEO Celeste Maston says H.B. Fuller must prudently prepare for a challenging volume growth environment in 2025. To improve its profitability, the company plans to cut 27 plants by 2030, leaving about 55 still in operation. HB will also cut 45 warehouses in North America by 2027, leaving it with 10. The company says the moves will save $75 million when fully implemented. H.B. Fuller has 7,200 employees. It's unknown how many will be impacted by the restructuring effort. Jeff, I understand working smarter, not harder, but are there enough tools to cut 72 facilities and right-size the company without losing business?
Honestly, I think so. The company's very interesting when you look at their history and kind of how they've come together and everything. H.B. Fuller in the last 20 years has had more than 20 acquisitions. Yeah. Okay, so they have grown through buying other companies. So you could kind of see how there would be a lot of excess there. I think in a lot of instances, companies are guilty of, we've gotten this new acquisition. Let's see how we can be as efficient as possible, synergize all of our operations and our people, make sure there's no redundancies. Whereas in this case, I think they were patient, which is kind of what we ask companies to do in these instances. Don't just rush to make all of these moves because there may be some organic resources and benefits to keeping those things in place. In this case, I think maybe they took that a little too far. Feels like maybe they could have moved sooner on some of the acquired assets that they had. And I think that's what they're kind of realizing now. When you look at this company, their stock price has not fallen off the table by any stretch, but over the last 18 months, it's definitely gone downward. So I think that this president is definitely feeling a lot of pressure to do something to right the ship and become more profitable again. I think this is an easy target. When you've got this many locations out there, it's easy to look at that and say, why do we have all these buildings? Yeah. Why can't we put people closer together? What can we do smarter here? And I think she's probably right. Yeah, I think it will. Quite honestly, when you start putting a lot of this together, because that's not, for that many locations and 7,200 employees, it almost feels like you could do more. Yeah, I know it's very abrupt when you talk about that many warehouses, but when you're looking at that many manufacturing plants, I think once you get going, they may even see more opportunities to bring things together and become even more efficient.
Well, I mean, that's how I envisioned this happening, where they just started looking at what could be cut, and they're like, oh, well, then there's this. No, well, then there's that.
But we could bring those together, too, and this would be easier, and now we don't need, especially distribution centers, 55. Yeah. I mean, cutting those 45 out, that, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it'd be that painful. I feel for the people that are going to be impacted, but if you're looking at this from more the 50,000-foot view, in the way that you can, it probably should have been a lot sooner.
No, and that's the one that stood out to me in particular was the dropping the 45 warehouses, just because you're so close to how logistics has gotten so much more efficient, so much smarter. There are just so many more tools at their disposal that was the one that to me it didn't jump out. Like it's a staggering number at first, but when you saw it, did you think like, oh no, that's actually probably really doable with modern tools?
I mean, you still can't change like the map of the United States and the fact that like it's going to be a much longer distance to deliver product to your customers who are expecting it quicker than ever. Yeah. So I think that you have to be a little bit careful there. I mean, space is one thing. Yeah. Technology is one thing, but like actually covering the miles in a truck, if they have to say like, normally we could get it to you in 2 days and now it's going to take us whatever. I mean, it will impact the business, in my opinion.
That's like more than one per state. Or is this globally? They're counting 50 or 45 globally?
That's the way I understood it.
I think it was a global cuts. Yeah. The warehouses were in North America.
Okay, that's right.
Factories were global, I think is how that played out. But I don't know. I looked at it from the same like set of parameters as you, but I think I took I had a different takeaway a little bit. The company revised its forecast downward recently, which it attributed to decelerating volumes in key segments. It named multiple segments: consumer goods, packaging, durable goods. They talked about higher raw material costs in hygiene, health, consumable adhesives. So they're expecting obviously some rockiness and some higher costs into 2025. Fair enough. To me, it felt like if those are the reasons, then this as a response to me indicates that they're maybe being a little bit more aggressive without looking at potential fallout from that, because they didn't say anything about redundancies. They said nothing about redundancies. They just said that we have costs to cut. So I don't know exactly, because to me, when you close a third of your plants and 2/3 of your warehouses, it surprises me that you would have that much redundancy in your organization for that long without doing anything about it before. 20 years is a long time to be acquiring companies and doing nothing about it. To me, like, footprint optimization should be incremental. I think a lot of companies treat it that way. And so to me, it felt like maybe there were some risks that were going to be inherent in this process. And maybe there were some things that they were not saying, like future plans to maybe consolidate industries or products, because I don't know exactly how you can support all these different end customers if you continue to reduce your footprint and expand the logistic length of how you get that product to them. It's just, I don't know. I feel like maybe more will come out in the future in terms of like how they streamline a little bit. That's my guess.
Well, and you did reach out to them looking for a little bit more information just in terms of what's going on, and they decided decline to comment. So
right, yeah, we did not hear from them.
I will say that they did recently cut their flooring business. I noticed that they divested that in December, sold it for like $80 million. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, okay, they're just going to start cutting and selling stuff off, right? But then I saw that in the same time frame, they bought 2 European medical adhesives companies.
Right, yeah.
And that made sense to me. I was like, okay, I could get why you want to get out of flooring adhesives and get into medical adhesives, because if you got to be in one or the other, what's more of a sure thing? Like, medical adhesives going to be here forever. I mean, so it's flooring, but you never know. I don't know. It just seemed like that made sense to me. And maybe that's just going to be the evolution of the company as they've continued to grow by acquisition.
Don't know. I feel like it's really easy to take it, Jeff's perspective and my perspective and your perspective on it, because they just didn't tell us enough about this. So I'm curious to see what happens.
Well, and when you cut 72 physical footprints, like, it just seems like it looks like you're on life support.
It does seem like a response that you would make to a board or shareholders that have seen a steady decline in terms of stock price too.
All right. Our next most popular story: battery firm abandons plan for $2.6 billion plant in Georgia. Freyr Battery is abandoning plans to build a giant electric battery factory near Atlanta and instead buying a solar panel plant in Texas. And it's a big deal, a $2.6 billion deal that was supposed to hire 700 people. The factory was going to make batteries to store electricity produced by renewable sources. It would have been the second largest battery factory worldwide, but construction never began. Freyr even moved its corporate headquarters from Norway to the area to maximize its eligibility for U.S. tax benefits. Well, the sun has set on the Georgia project, and according to the AP, Freyr is shifting focus to a newly opened solar panel factory that the company bought last year for $340 million from Trina Solar, a Chinese solar panel manufacturer. The decision was driven by rising interest rates, falling battery prices, a change in company leadership, and a shift in the company's goals. The Georgia Department of Economic Development put up a $7 million grant to buy the site in Noonan, which is about 35 miles southwest of Atlanta, but the state hopes to be repaid expeditiously. The company has already taken many forms. First, it planned to build battery factories in Norway and Finland, but plans to sell that part of the business. The company was also licensing the technology to make batteries. They paid $3 million for it, for that business or that license to an unnamed company. And Freyer's cash on hand recently fell from $253 million at the end of 2023 to $182 million on September 30th of last year. Jeff, according to the company, Chinese batteries are flooding the market. So it is switching to solar because people are investing in solar right now. But should people be investing in Freyer?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, there's just a lot of different points I think that I took out of this article. First of all, I think you have to give Georgia some credit here for covering themselves. Mm-hmm. This was potentially a huge project, and they did lay out, was it $7 million for the land?
Yeah.
Made a bunch of other plans as well, but this falls through, and they're already sort of had plans in place to recover what they had put out there already. So I was kind of impressed there. They had the right verbiage, the right understanding with this agreement that if it didn't happen, the taxpayers weren't going to be left out in the cold. So I got to give them some credit there. I think this also shows, man, Georgia's had a lot going on with these types of projects. When you look at the Rivian situation, and now we ran a story, I think it was just yesterday or today, talking about a $30 million hydrogen refueling facility and project, also in Georgia. So they've definitely got a familiarity with it, and kudos to them in terms of setting these projects up correctly so that they're not, out in the cold if something falls through. You mentioned Freyer and sort of their decision as a company. I think this is also sort of contrary to what we've seen lately. This is they still consider themselves a startup, I believe. Yeah. They're 7 years old, something like that. So for them to make a decision that's based more on short-term cash flow than long-term gain, I think is interesting. Solar panels are a market that's projected to increase about 12% over the next 10 years. So it's like steady. Mm-hmm. It's nothing crazy. It's just going to be steady growth, which seems to be what they want right now. They want some cash flow. Yeah. Whereas some of those markets with those batteries that they were going to be producing, the opportunity there is huge. That market could scale up and double over the next 10 years as well. But there's more competition we talked about and a lot going on there. So it's interesting for a company of that age or that maturity to make a decision more focused on cash flow than opportunity. We don't see that a lot. Also, though, the fact that they talked about Chinese competition, but there's so much conversation right now about the tariffs and how that's going to affect things coming in from China. So again, getting back to that conversation about product versus market and opportunity, you'd think an opportunity to have these batteries made here in the U.S. and avoid those tariffs would potentially offer a huge cost advantage to that company. Yeah. They must just not see it happening quickly enough is what I'm guessing. China's going to play too much of a role before or have become too much embedded in that marketplace before they could get up and running and compete would be my only guess there. And then the other thing, just looking at these battery storage, battery energy storage, what's the word? Like facilities? Supplies or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So, versus the solar panels. It isn't. I just can't keep coming back to because it's such an interesting market decision for them to make, which is very contrary to what you see a lot of people doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, Anna, when I look at the story, the one thing I see is that, they're burning through cash. Mm-hmm. They're like, okay, we can't raise enough money right now for batteries, so we're doing solar panels. So give us more money because we're going to make solar panels. And I don't know, if I'm an investor, it's just like things are not looking great. So I'm gonna take more of a wait and see mode.
I mean, maybe I saw it a little bit differently. I saw it as because they were already doing both. The solar panel factory they bought a year ago, I think, that wasn't just a pivot. That maybe they were just like scaling back a little bit on what they were putting out there. Yeah. Just generally speaking, the thing that was interesting to me is I also saw that there was a company based in Idaho called Core Power that also nixed a $1.25 billion battery plant just like around the exact same time as this story broke.
Oh, wow.
And that factory was to be in Arizona, like Maricopa area, and it was being blamed on a funding issue. In this case, the Arizona Republic reported that Core Power never received taxpayer money for the project, even though they were approved for a conditional loan from the DOE. Apparently they never received the money.
Oh.
It would have that factory would have produced lithium-ion technology for transportation and energy storage. Again, it would have brought thousands of jobs to Maricopa County. Core came out later and said that it was now hunting for an existing plant to utilize. And Canary Media, in covering this, said that it was, quote, due to political chaos that the company ditched this long simmering effort to build a factory from scratch.
Yeah.
And I think when you couple that with the Freyr situation, where they came from Norway to take advantage of a Biden law around climate and climate investment, and then surprise scale back, I think maybe you can see some shakiness from these companies in renewable energy as the administration changes. They don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty out there right now. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that maybe people are getting spooked.
Yeah.
That's the way I saw it.
People are pivoting to drill, baby, drill.
No, but I think if you can buy an existing plant instead of building a one from scratch, or if you can focus only on solar instead of the energy storage right now and not both, maybe that kind of hedges you a little bit against whatever uncertainty is to come.
Well, and with inflation and the sheer cost of materials, I mean.
Exactly, another huge factor, exactly.
All right. Our most popular story this week, small 3D printed piece could save Air Force millions in fuel costs. The C-17 Globemaster III is a flexible aircraft used to carry troops and all types of cargo from point A to point B. It's also a massive plane and not particularly fuel efficient, but a small 3D printed device could help. The Air Force Operational Energy and Air Mobility Command says it's in the final phase of testing for microvane drag reduction technology. That's a thin blade measuring about 4 to 16 inches. When about a dozen microvanes are glued to the back of a C-17, it results in a 1% reduction in drag. Now, that might not sound like that much, but it means reducing fuel consumption to the tune of $14 million annually for the Air Force. The technology, which was developed in cooperation with the Air Force Research Lab, private industry, and the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, helps reduce the aerodynamic drag caused by the upswept design of the C-17's cargo door section. It's already proven to work so well that partner countries like Canada and the UK want to add them to their C-17 fleets as well. Anna, it's important to note that these types of solutions, they have sort of a longer history rather than somebody just slapping something on and seeing if it works.
Yeah, I know. It's like sounds like it's coming out of the blue, but it's really not when you look at the history here. And I think this kind of goes hand in hand with the discussion that we had around the F-35 and how making smart decisions and using the technology that's available can also have a cost-cutting benefit. And as long as we are not cutting costs at the expense of quality, then absolutely I think the military should be using 3D printing and, other sort of, I hate to use the word emerging because I don't think that's true anymore, but you get my point.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we need to be using those to the utmost of those capabilities. And I think we're seeing the payoff here of investments made over the years with agencies like the Air Force Research Lab and DARPA, frankly, that have made to bring some of these to the forefront. If you look at what DARPA has done in the last decade, they've really been heavy in their development of additive manufacturing and looking at how the military can utilize those. So I think to see how they have been able to accelerate the use of critical structural parts produced through 3D printing is very important here. It didn't just come out of the blue. It's somebody's great idea that was developed over time, and now it's being put to the test. And it is like such a small thing. But, I just we talk about cutting research dollars, and I think sometimes people can be pretty cavalier about that and maybe cutthroat. And I think that it's important to stress that this is the kind of stuff that we lose when we do that. Sometimes you can't see the bigger picture of what it is until, and a friend of mine uses the term, the thing that leads to the thing. And I think that's appropriate here because you don't know where this started, the original ambition behind the developed into this. I mean, it's just years and years of R&D in the works.
No, if there's one place to watch, if you want to ever know what's leading to something else, just see what DARPA's doing.
Exactly.
I mean, they're not going to hit every time, but they are at the forefront of all of these, like every major advancement, and they're funding the people that are working on it. Jeff, one thing that kind of stood out to me is, could you imagine that initial conversation where somebody brought in like a micro vein? They're like, hey, what's that? This is called a micro vein, and we're going to glue it to the C-17. They're just like, and what's it going to do?
The hell
it's
you
gonna
are.
Save us $14 million. What do you mean? Like, I don't know. Sometimes the solution winds up being way more simple than you would imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting watching this video and going through this story and the stuff Anna was just talking about. It actually took me back to the first story that I did for Impo magazine. It was out in Boston. I went to go see Z Corp.
Okay.
Now they were the company that was spun out of, was it MIT? It was MIT, Boston University, one of the two, basically for 3D printing. That's where it started. That's where a mechanical engineer professor had the idea, and they started Z Corp. And we were out there doing a story on constructing the printers themselves, which were the size of this desk, okay? And for them to demonstrate the capabilities of what these machines could do you remember all the crazy things they used to print out? They were just like toys, or they were things like ball bearings in like a circular structure just to show the different capabilities. And then they showed us color. Now we can print them in color and all these different resins. And then we started doing stories, unfortunately, about stuff like people were using them to print gun parts. Well, then we realized we can also use them for automotive parts, 3D printing bikes. Now we're 3D printing organs. Now we're to this point where we can 3D print something that is kind of boring in nature, but has this huge impact and still gets a ton of attention. I think that really says a lot about this technology and how it's been embraced at a wider vein than we really probably appreciated when I was back doing that story. 17 years ago, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Just talking about the construction and the lean manufacturing principles used to just make the printer itself. Yeah. So it's crazy.
Anna, to your point, I was just having a conversation today with a major stakeholder in 3D printing about how, all the things that are being realized now in the industry with 3D printing, we were talking about 15, 20 years ago. They're just like, this is how you can use it. And everyone for so long has been dragging their feet just like, sure. And I mean, there were always issues with how brittle the parts were. And, really the material science behind a lot of this has come so far. But it's just, to Jeff's point, it's really cool to see the potential being realized. And we're still only scratching the surface. Like the way that AI is going to be used to completely turn additive manufacturing and 3D printing on its head, I think is going to be wild.
Why do you got to bring in like the robotics and everything, David? Why?
Because
why you got to bring that in? Why? I can tell you want to take this in a dystopian
I
direction.
don't. Nope.
About how they're going to be printing. I don't know.
Not at all.
Enclosures for us to recreate the Matrix, or
no.
I don't know.
I live to serve them.
No, that's my point.
No, so part of it is that with AI, one of the big things with additive manufacturing and 3D printing is that nobody knows how to design for it, and so that AI could essentially bridge that gap in terms of being able to create designs that traditional trained engineers otherwise couldn't wrap their heads around. But it's like a short bridge, because we are just coming up on the new crop of engineers that has for their entire life had access to 3D printing technology. And so I think, again, we're just scratching the surface in terms of where this is going. All right, before we jump into, in case you missed it, we have another word from our sponsor, Clio Communications. Increasing efforts to digitalize, automate, analyze is a priority for 30% of operation and supply chain officers that are heading into this year. However, the majority of the supply chain workforce still lacks the digital expertise needed to operate promising new tools. The 2024 Supply Chain Jobs Report gives you a detailed look into what supply chain organizations are doing or not doing to prepare their workforce for emerging tech, along with the digital skills you'll need to embed into your hiring criteria. So, download it now. There is a link in the live chat as well as the body copy below. Download that and let us know what you think. In case you missed it, stories maybe not as popular, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'll go first this week. I chose a story that I wrote with a bit of a word salad headline, just trying to check all the boxes. Autonomous robot to build assemblies in space like Tinkertoys to prove off-Earth manufacturing is possible. See, Jeff, I said I was going to talk about it later.
Attaboy.
So DARPA's Nomad program has entered its third and final phase. It's the first two phases of the Novel Orbital and Moon Manufacturing Materials and Mass Efficient Design Program. Teams took Earth-based materials to simulate lunar soil and tried to use them as raw materials in orbit manufacturing. In the final phase, teams are going to try to use Earth-based materials and manufacturing processes for testing in space. As commercial space companies continue to open up access to orbit, it's still tough to build large-scale structures up there because they're typically size and weight limits imposed on a rocket's cargo fairing. So I chose this story because I thought it was incredible. And one of the really cool parts of this story is that basically phases 1 and 2 worked so well that phase 3 was just supposed to be in the lab testing, right? Like, hey, prove it. But they were basically like, well, when you do lab testing, if something goes wrong, you can kind of sweep it under the rug. So we're going to put you up in space and see if it actually works. And it was kind of a foot to the fire that might be a little bit different for this sort of timeline. And I thought it was really interesting because they're talking about how we're going to need these massive antennas, particularly in between Earth and the moon. And the most efficient way to make them might be to have them build themselves with autonomous robots in orbit. And I thought that was incredible. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to check out this story. What'd you think?
No, these are always really intriguing to me because, again, we're talking about, I mean, it's truly like that sort of that pioneering spirit. I mean, it's really easy to talk about being able to do these things, but then to actually have to walk the walk a little bit is really interesting, especially developing the processes and the methodologies that are going to have to be employed once you get to these completely different operating environments. I think it's just intriguing. It's incredible. And I can't wait to see not just the ability to do this, but what we're going to learn from this. Mm-hmm. The things that are going to come from this thing.
Teeing it up for you.
Mm-hmm. I think is pretty incredible. And that goes back to a lot of whenever we have these conversations about space travel, whether it's going to the moon, to Mars, Artemis, SpaceX, whatever the case is, there's so much that we can draw from these experiences that we don't even know about yet. So the ability, taking this sort of accelerating this process and this project, I think is really exciting. I think it was a great idea. And, should be fun to see what happens.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see how it could potentially change manufacturing, right? Because so in Caltech, which is responsible for one of the different projects, basically it's going to be a gantry robot that's autonomously going to assemble these lightweight thin tubes that are about 1.3 meters in diameter, or circular trusses to simulate the architectural structure of an antenna. And the fact that they're basically just going to put all this up there, Anna, and let it put itself together, I don't know. I thought it was very inspiring. And they're going to do it soon. It was like the timelines are like 2026. So within the next year, they're going to sink or swim.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the goal, if I'm understanding correctly, the goal for space manufacturing is essentially to produce things in space that they can do more efficiently than they can actually on Earth.
Correct. Well, more efficiently, and for tools that were So I mean, think about if instead of having to blast a satellite or materials or anything into space, we could basically use what we have there to make it where it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, like the end product. I mean, like, so they've talked about how there are certain pharmaceuticals that they can make in space, and it's like because of the zero gravity environment, it's somehow like, I don't know, they can produce
synthesized differently,
faster,
or whatever.
And so it'll be interesting to see like what the first actual product will be if and when this becomes a reality for manufacturing. That's what I'm looking forward to finding out.
Well, and I think it's two different things in terms of if we actually do manufacture things in space that are easier and quicker that we can ship back here. I think that would be incredibly cool too. And also just when we talk about waste, cost, even if you want to talk about the pollution that it takes to get things into space, if we can just make them there, be a lot more efficient all around.
What about what happens to free shipping?
Free shipping?
Like, even if I have a Prime membership, like, do I still get free shipping from space?
Yeah, I think actually this just means that the eventual thing that it leads to is that you have something in your basement that'll just make whatever it is you want.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Same minute shipping. Anna, what's your in case you missed it this week?
I selected a story titled 86% of manufacturers look to increase AI investments amid tariff threats. So I thought I would try to include multiple words that you hear every day.
Oh, yeah.
Tariff, AI. So the story is about an automation and AI software company called UiPath that released a new report that revealed what they say 90% of IT executives believe that they could improve business processes through agentic AI, while 77% state that they're prepared to invest in it this year. Agentic AI basically being task-oriented virtual assistants, something that provides data to inform decision-making, things like that. So the report notes that emerging technologies like AI and agentic AI could help manufacturers specifically save time and money in the back end of automating workflows and filling labor gaps. Of course, they're going to say that they're an IT company. But I did find it interesting because we anecdotally have been hearing a ton about AI. Yeah. And I think while this is a high number, this 90%, I do think that it might track that we get something almost close to that. I believe that because, I do think it's a buzzword, but at the same time, it has so many things going for it in terms of making it actually realistic for company to use. For one, it's not all super expensive. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is contained within applications that IT companies are putting out that these manufacturers already use. Mm-hmm. And then also experts are saying that you don't have to be tech savvy to start small with AI. Yeah. So you're seeing a lot of companies that are traditionally more laggards and maybe they're still using spreadsheets, whatever, but they have found ways of leveraging some AI tools, at least at the baseline. So do I think some companies are paying lip service to that? Yes, I do think there's a lot of companies out there that are like, we are going to work on this, shareholders, because it's very efficient and it's how we'll save some money. And so there's a lot of pie in the sky there. But I also do think that there are a lot of businesses in manufacturing and distribution that are very serious about getting some of these tools on board. So,
well, and I think you need to, depending on how you want to get into it, right, is figure out what you're going to try to specifically target with AI as a way to introduce it to your company. Because, I mean, it honestly seemed even low to me that only 86% of manufacturers were looking to increase AI. I feel like just what you hear in the industry is everyone says, like, we're looking to use more of it. We're just trying to figure out how.
Yeah.
Or, what works best for our company. Jeff, were you surprised that only 86% of manufacturers are looking to increase AI investments?
I think AI is becoming one of those terms that can be defined in different ways. And, and not just the technical definition, but just the personal understanding of it and how you apply that term. Because really, when I see agentic AI, correct me if I'm wrong, that's machine learning.
Yeah.
Right? Which manufacturers have been using for decades.
Yeah.
So to say that they're going to use more of it, that should almost be organic to, if you have any type of automation platform, you're going to be using more machine learning, more artificial intelligence. So it makes sense. It's good to hear. It shouldn't be going backwards. If it's going backwards, I think we have a huge issue. So the number should continue to rise, and it should be up over 90%.
Yeah.
Again, if you're not adapting even something like large language models, ChatGPT, just to help streamline coding, for your CNC machines or any of those types of things, you're missing the boat.
Yeah.
So it's reassuring to me to hear that, because I know that it's being used. When we look at how AI is being implemented in manufacturing, it's being done sort of systematically, which is very smart in my opinion. We're not just throwing everything out there and see what works. I think manufacturers have been very smart in the way they've implemented it. So I think we'll continue to see that number rise. But just because there's more doing it, I don't think that doesn't mean we're seeing this huge explosion across the enterprise and being used in every different type of facet or capacity.
No, I think the huge explosion
being targeted.
Yeah, the huge explosion has been caused by everyone just saying like, hey, we had all these products and no one was paying attention to them, so now that's an AI product. Because, I mean, to your point, we've been doing a lot of this stuff in manufacturing for a long time. A lot of it you could say is kind of baked in manufacturing. Yeah. And so I do think there's a little bit of that as well. Just a little bit of rebranding, Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying I know when I do these cybersecurity stories, they seem really scary.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of positive that comes out of exposing a lot of these numbers that we're going to be talking about.
I thought you were just scaring us straight all the time. All
Well, a little bit. So the story I picked was one we actually just posted today. It's a report shows that surging automotive cyber threats are stemming from critical gaps. Okay, so Upstream Security just published their 2025 Automotive and Smart Mobility Cybersecurity Report. And I'm just going to hit on a couple of the stats here to sort of set the table. It revealed that last year, 60% of cybersecurity incidents in automotive and smart mobility affected thousands to millions of mobility assets, vehicles, EV charging stations, smart mobility apps, and connected devices. The one that's important there is these EV charging systems, because if we have cybersecurity vulnerabilities there, they're connected to the grid. And if it gets to the grid, it can start shutting down some pretty important stuff. That's where a lot of this comes from. And there's a lot of other stats in here. Like I said, I'm not going to get into all of them. The end takeaway here, and it is definitely worth looking at, is there's more cybersecurity hacks. There's more ransomware that's happening as a result of all the greater level of connectivity within an automobile, as well as all the connected devices that now are part of that. So your cell phone, your tablets, any type of ERP potentially used in the construction or the manufacturing of these systems as well. So all this is coming together. The number of hacks is increasing. The number of vulnerabilities is increasing. But really the takeaway here is we see more of it. It's much more visible. It's much more plain and understood that we have a problem here. The first part of solving a problem is recognizing it and dealing with it. And I think we've come so far, whether it's automotive, industrial, everything we deal with on a day-to-day basis, passwords, okay? All these different elements of cybersecurity are becoming talked about so much more, and they're becoming much more visible and more prevalent that people are developing smarter solutions for them that we can implement more quickly to help try to shut down more of these attacks. I honestly don't feel that there's that many more attacks. I think we're just hearing about more attacks.
Yeah.
Which is a positive thing. There's more things being reported because they have to. Okay, there's certain mandates in place, whether it's with suppliers, whether it's with the government, whatever the case may be, we have to talk about this stuff now. So overall, a lot of scary stuff in the report in terms of increased cyber attack activity. But again, looking at it through the focus or through the lens of it's good that we're having these conversations, I think is the bigger takeaway from this article. So I'd encourage you to check it out for that reason.
Well, Anna, I mean, to jump on the scare pile here, ransomware attacks, we ran it this week. Ransomware attacks are costing manufacturers $1.9 million a day. So it's good to see that these things are being exposed more and that we're doing more to rid ourselves of them.
Yeah.
We never will rid ourselves of them, but, tamp them down a touch.
Yeah, exactly. I read an article, I think this week or last, that was talking about how many companies that were ransomware attacked this year that just didn't pay, and that they were talking about how that was actually lending to a little bit of a decline in ransomware attacks. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, I think, more prominent people are developing better response plans because they've begun to embrace the fact that it's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
So when you get hacked, what is your response to it, and how quickly can you kick them out of the system? And again, that comes from having these conversations and talking about the scary stuff as opposed to just kind of putting our head in the sand.
All right. Well, let's jump into our final thoughts this week before we go back to our desks and bury our heads in the sand. Hannah, what is your final thought this week?
So today I went to a big box retailer on my lunch break to buy a few odds and ends for Valentine's Day. And when I got to the self-checkout, I scanned all my stuff and pulled out my wallet, but I didn't pull out my wallet because it wasn't there, and realized that I have been driving around for 3 days without my wallet. I think I just left it Anyway, but these nice young ladies at customer service helped me to pay on my phone. Oh. And
wow.
Relaying this story.
Did they call you ma'am?
Oh my God. Relaying the story to my husband over text. He just got a good kick out of that one. I felt very old.
Yeah. Oh, you can actually play with your phone. What?
Yeah. They're
this thing?
Yeah. And then they're like, do you have an account? And I was like, I do. And I pulled it up and they're like, this is the mobile site. Do you have the app? And I was like, oh, I know the difference. I do know the difference. Yeah, but I got done.
More to come. Well, that's great that you were able to get to pay it. Because, I feel like that moment that I went for my wallet and I didn't feel it, I would just have immediate fear and run. Just I got to get out of here.
My husband was like, he was like, LOL, do you want me to buy my own beef jerky this year? I was like, oh, it's so embarrassing.
No, so you went for Valentine's Day, you went to Quick Trip?
He would not hate that. He would love a Quick Trip gift card for Valentine's Day.
Just
his favorite place.
Prepare Best ourselves restaurant. For more of that going forward.
Yep.
But I think if you embrace it, just like, you know what? Getting older, this new tech, forget about it.
Yeah, not doing it. Don't know how to do it. Here's my phone. You figure it out.
Yeah, more of a late mover here.
Yep.
My final thought this week was that this weekend I got the chance to see the show Shucked. And you might be thinking, hey, do I want to spend 3 hours of my time watching a musical about corn? Yes, you do, because it's hilarious. It's just incredible. Every 30-second, everything's a dad joke or a pun. And if that trips your trigger, you're in for a treat. Otherwise, just pass on it. The people that are going to Shucked thinking that, it is a Tony Award-winning show, but the people that are going to Shucked thinking that they're going to see some sort of Broadway majesty, like some highbrow entertainment, you're seeing Shucked. There are giant blow-up cobs of corn in the lobby. Let's all just check our expectations at the door. But it is a hilarious 2+ hours. I highly recommend it. Next time it comes around, I'm going to go see it again because it was just fun.
Is it a musical or just a play?
It's a musical.
It's a musical.
It's a musical, and it is. The songs are fun. They're not. There's right away what you're getting into, and it's just like, all right, this is okay. And then there's a little bow that they tie at the end where you're just like, oh, and you know what, that makes it worth it. But no, it's highly worth your time. Yeah, corn music, Jeff.
Who'd have thunk?
Music. Yeah.
Who'd have thunk?
Someone did, and they thought about it for a long time. Every corn pun you could possibly think of is in there.
But that's why, talking about it, you enjoyed it, and people were maybe not so, more critical of it or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why I don't even look at Rotten Tomatoes for movie reviews anymore. It's totally worthless.
Yeah, you can't. Just enjoy it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff, what's your final thought?
Closing thought, it was very cold getting off the plane Sunday. And it wasn't super warm where we were topped out at like 65, but when you get off the plane and it's 15, I think I'm still feeling that.
Yeah. No, it was, and shoveling this morning was fun.
I think I underappreciated just how much seeing green and blue skies and feeling a little bit warmer, like that really felt more amazing than I anticipated.
Oh, yeah. Do you find yourself just, more often going, oh, I wouldn't hate more of this?
No, it was funny, too, because we're out there and, it's California and it's their winter months. Mm-hmm. So I'm walking around in shorts and you've got people like in a winter coat.
Yeah.
So
people are freezing.
Who's weirder?
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We will see you next week.